Welcome to Sober and Lit,
the podcast for women who want to get sober, stay sober, and live a life that's way more lit than it ever was with wine.
We're your hosts, Ruby and Susan, two alcohol freedom coaches keeping it real with stories, tools, and zero judgment.
Whether you're sober curious or all in, you're in the right place.
Let's feel lit, alcohol free.
Welcome back to the Sober and Lit podcast. We are excited to be with you today. And today we have an amazing special guest. We have Mike Marshall, who is the CEO of the U.S. Alcohol Policy Alliance, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization translating alcohol policy research into public health practice. And I've been following the Alliance on LinkedIn, and their motto is change the narrative, stop alcohol-related harm, which we are all about, right, Ruby?
Yes.
So let me introduce Mike, and then we can dive into the important work that he and the U.S. Alcohol Policy Alliance are doing. So Mike Marshall is the CEO of the U.S. Alcohol Policy Alliance, bringing more than 30 years of change-making, policy advocacy, and civic organization experience to this role. He's a longtime national and international organizer. Mike has worked in over 20 countries supporting election monitoring, civic engagement, and voter education. He also helped launch the marriage equality movement, later leading major campaigns focused on public health, environmental restoration, and addiction recovery. Before joining the USAPA, Mike co-founded the Oregon Recovers and played a key role in building the Oregon Alcohol Policy Alliance. So today he leads USAPA's work to strengthen alcohol policy, raise awareness of alcohol-related harms, and advance public health nationwide. Mike lives in Portland, Oregon with his husband, Rob, and Out Magazine identified Mike as one of the top 100 most influential LGBTQ plus Americans. So congratulations on that. That's great. So you have a lot of experience with policy making and moving agendas forward. And this is so needed right now in the alcohol space, right? So what, from your perspective, are the biggest misunderstandings people have about alcohol policy, and how do those misconceptions impact families and communities?
Okay, great. Susan, Ruby, thank you so much for inviting me here today. These conversations are really important. I appreciate the work that you guys are doing and the spotlight you're shining, giving us the opportunity to talk about alcohol policy. You know, where to begin in terms of the misconceptions and how they impact us. I think, you know, you introduced a U.S. Alcohol Policy Alliance, the acronym we pronounce is USAPA. So if I say USAPA, that's what I'm talking about. And, you know, we're the one organization nationwide that's exclusively focused on reducing and preventing the harms related to alcohol. We live in a country that since Prohibition, has increasingly seen the marketing of alcohol as something as critical to every social, professional, sports interaction, right? It's just so ingrained due to alcohol advertising and marketing on the one side, and no voice on the other side saying, hey, wait a minute, it's a toxic, addictive carcinogen that kills more people every year than fentanyl overdoses, gun violence deaths, and car crashes combined.
Wow.
And all of those things need more resources to combat, but they are all way more resource than the effort to address alcohol. And so I would say the biggest misconception is the fact that alcohol does harm. And the second biggest conception is that it harms at a level that no one has any imagination for, and that demands that we regulate this toxic, addictive carcinogen more like we do tobacco than we do sliced bread.
That's brilliant. Yes. Informed choice. That's what I'm all about. I call myself an alcohol awareness advocate because once I became aware from my own journey of the harms of alcohol, and even I was talking with my husband, he's like, how come we don't learn this? You know, in school, even in the DARE programs, like I've shared on this program, our DARE program had a happy hour fundraiser. Like, just shoot me. Like, really, right? It's just insane, you know.
Everywhere.
Yeah. It's so important.
It's everywhere. And more than half of Americans don't know that alcohol is a carcinogen.
Right.
And so knowledge is power. And part of it is the alcohol industry's been out there selling all their stuff, and there's no one been on our side of it articulating the concerns about it, particularly in the last 20 years. And that's unfortunate. Like, the medical profession should have been front and center on this. However, the medical profession, doctors, nurses, they drink. Everybody drinks, right? It's such an integrated part of our life. And I realized in the introduction you did of me, the thing I'm most proud of and the thing I've been most successful at is the fact that in January, I'll have 18 years of continuous sobriety to celebrate. And so, God willing.
Will you share a little bit of your story, please? I'd love to hear that. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Well, it's certainly not unique in any way. I come from an Irish Catholic family, born in the early 60s. Our family was upwardly mobile. My dad, was a salesman in the electronics industry, and alcohol was a big part of his job in terms of lunching and dinners. And then, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, but ran all the PTA and all the different clubs. And our house was a party house. We celebrated alcohol. We had red wine glasses, white wine glasses, champagne flutes, beer steins, shot glasses. Like, it was all memorialized, and every family function, despite the outcome, would always include alcohol. I was raised to understand that alcohol was just a day-to-day staple. And when I was 11 years old, my family moved to Europe. And I started drinking wine at the table when I was in 6th grade. And my dad bought me my first beer at the Oktoberfest in Germany when I was in 7th grade. And I was just off to the races. And alcohol was, then and big part of my life is I've had a very exciting life. I've worked in 20 different countries. I've gotten drunk in 20 different countries. And it just sort of, the consequences from alcohol were not, they were building, but they weren't as extensive as then I developed as I came out of the closet. I was a late bloomer in the 30s, got involved in a lot of gay rights movement stuff. Again, alcohol is everywhere in the gay community.
Yes.
It's no coincidence that Stonewall, where we launched the gay rights movement, was a bar because it was a safe place. It was a community place long before there were any other safe places, right? Was the gay bars. And so I developed a party drug addiction. And that's ultimately what took me down and forced me to go to treatment 18 years ago. But alcohol was my drug of choice throughout my life. And the night before I went to treatment, I took myself out to dinner and I ordered a glass of red wine and a glass of white wine. And I said goodbye to alcohol. I sat there and had this little, okay, you're gone out of my life. We've been together 46 years. We're done. This relationship is over. And there are a lot of things I credit my sobriety to, but I think having that conversation in my head and having that ritual of saying goodbye to alcohol was really important.
I like that. Yeah, I like that too.
And so do I miss it on occasion? I never had cravings once I got through treatment, but I miss the celebratory part of it, or meeting somebody for a drink or sitting at a dinner party and opening another bottle of red wine and sitting around the table and people being silly and emotional and passionate. But all that stuff can happen in sobriety, right? And honestly, as the sober person at that table now, when the third bottle of red wine opens, it's just boring, right? There's nothing.
Totally.
But none of that has to do with addressing the harms related to alcohol. That's just my personal story. But we as a society have got to address the fact that it's killing so many people. It's so integrated with gun violence. It's so integrated with poverty. It's so integrated with cancer. It's or intersectional, I should say, is really the word, not integrated. And we're not talking about any of those things at a public health level or at a public level. And so that's why I was really attracted to the role of CEO of the U.S. Alcohol Policy Alliance. We've been around 15 years, but I'm the first full-time staff person. We have a few consultants that work with us, but we are a startup for all intents and purposes. And like I said, we're the lone voice out there.
Yeah. And I think the Soberverse, though, a lot of the people that I follow on social media are starting up that conversation as well. And so I think that there is a lot of traction right now. And some of that was interestingly, I don't know if it was started, but it was great that the U.S. Surgeon General came out last January 2025. Yes. And incidentally, Vivek Murthy went to Yale Medical School. So I knew him there, but I was like, yes, go. Saying that he wanted to have an advisory around the alcohol cancer link around alcohol, and suggested also that the labeling should change as well. Yeah. But then he, with the new administration, went out of office, and who knows where that's going. But what do you wish more people understood about alcohol as a toxic carcinogen? Because I think people look at me sideways when I tell them that. They're like, well, everything causes cancer. And I'm like, well,
right.
I do hear that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the science is that people who drink a lot are less likely to believe that, right? Because who wants to believe that? But yeah, Vivek Murthy's efforts at the tail end of the Biden administration were hugely important for provoking a conversation, right? He knew that it wasn't going to go anywhere. We're a far way off from Congress doing anything meaningful around alcohol policy at this point, because the industry is just so ingrained there on both sides of the aisle. It's a very bipartisan issue. And we, again, we've not been doing the work on this side of it. And we're going to change that. U.S. Alcohol Policy Alliance and all of our member organizations are looking to change that. Dr. Murthy's advisory was, look, increasingly the evidence demonstrates that alcohol is linked to 7 forms of cancer, ranging from, liver cancer to breast cancer, to esophageal cancer. And that given how few people know that, it's in the public interest to mandate that the alcohol industry advise their customers, their clients about this by putting warning labels, much like Ireland is about to do. And Korea, I believe, already does. And knowledge is power. We know that when people understand the consequences, they will make different decisions for themselves. And it's why the alcohol industry is fighting warning labels so badly, because they do not want people to view alcohol the way they view tobacco, which is it causes cancer and other health consequences.
Yeah. And that's true. It does. And it's crazy when you see, a bottle of wine with the pink breast cancer ribbon on it. And it's just unbelievable. Yeah. I guess I always knew that it could contribute to breast cancer, but some people I talked to even didn't know that. But right. The other cancers, the 7 different kinds of cancer. And just when we went through coaching, we just learned like how alcohol, it's acetaldehyde, the byproduct of alcohol that our body produces that is a carcinogen. It's just unbelievable. Yeah. Once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. So it is really important.
And female bodies process it much slower and have more difficult time than male bodies do, right? And so there needs to be a gender distinction relative to understanding the consequences of it. And the current dietary guidelines on alcohol consumption, which are about to change this month, did draw a distinction between men and women, but still we're not telling the complete truth in the sense of they're saying that there was some safe level of alcohol consumption, and that's just not true.
And now it's 0. And I'd like to challenge that it's every kind of cancer can happen from alcohol, because alcohol breaks that cell barrier. And it affects everything, your hormones, your brain chemicals, every cell in your body, skin. I mean, maybe it's a contributor also to skin cancer, right? Because if it's breaking up the cell wall, also you're not sleeping well. Your body's not healing at night. That's when you need to heal. And, your rogue cells go out and find the cancer cells while you're sleeping in the middle of the night and healing. And all of this is not happening when you're drinking. So it's way more than 7. Yeah.
Well, and it's not just cancer, right? It's your respiratory system as well. Alcohol really screws the respiratory system. And it's why during COVID, it was just mind-boggling to me that they allowed bars and restaurants to be essential businesses to stay open, right? When in fact, not only does COVID is a respiratory virus, and you need, because of social distancing, you need really sound judgment, and alcohol undermines both of those things. And yet it took us 9 months here in the state of Oregon to get the Oregon Health Authority to put out a Facebook post talking about the fact that alcohol impacts your respiratory system and your judgment. while they were doing all kinds of education around COVID, they refused to talk about alcohol because of the power of the alcohol industry here in the state. And so, we've said this multiple times on this show, and we say it over and over again, but people need to have that knowledge and then do with that knowledge whatever they damn well please, right? Like, don't listen to me, but listen to the facts and then make the best decisions for yourself and for your family.
Absolutely. Just like smoking. People still smoke. Okay, go ahead. But they know the risks. And I think they should be afforded the same opportunity with alcohol. Absolutely. Well, so what 100%. Do you think the current policy gets right and wrong about the current policy? And what would you like to see reflected in the revised dietary guidelines?
Great question. So, every 5 years, the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Agriculture put out the dietary guidelines of America.
Yeah.
And we all know from when we were younger, the food pyramid, we know it for food for the most part, but they also make recommendations around alcohol. And starting about 10 years ago, they said 2 drinks a day for men and 1 drink a day for women were acceptable levels of alcohol consumption. Mm-hmm. But the recent science has demonstrated that for men, 2 drinks a day, if you drink 1 drink a day, you have a 1 in 1,000 chance of dying of a death related to alcohol. If you do 2 drinks a day, you have a 1 in 25 chance of dying as a consequence of alcohol. The distinction between 1 and 2 drinks is just off the charts significant. Wow. And so there was a full expectation that they almost did it 5 years ago. They almost changed it then. And the expectation was we would get it down to 1 drink for men and 1 drink for women. We as an organization would like the U.S. to follow what the World Health Organization and what the Canadian government have done, which is, look, go ahead and drink, but understand there is no safe level of alcohol consumption, right? That there is harms associated. And even, a half a glass a day of wine increase your risk for breast cancer. And 2 drinks a day for women of wine definitely does. So, all this marketing to mommy clubs and, all that stuff, there needs to be way more mandated education along with that level of marketing. So the dietary guidelines, we fully were fighting and expected we were going to get 1 drink a day for men and 1 drink a day for women. And then 5 years from now, we'd do it all over again and try and get to where we should be. The Trump administration came in and Secretary Kennedy came in, and we were optimistic, right? Secretary Kennedy has talked a lot about the fact that he's sober and that alcohol was his drug of choice with heroin. And Donald Trump thinks alcohol is terrible.
Right.
He's quoted as saying to people, don't drink. To kids, do not drink. It's terrible. His chief of staff, her husband, talked publicly about being in AA. So we were kind of bully, like this is an administration that is going to be good on alcohol policy, but they're also the most anti-regulatory administration forever. And, several of President Trump's closest friends are owners of alcohol companies. And so we don't know yet. They're coming out with the new guidelines this month, but they have leaked to the press. And it's our expectation that not only are they not going to say 2 drinks a day for men and 1 drink a day for women. They're just going to get rid of that and say drink moderately or drink responsibly, which is exactly what the alcohol industry wants. And your idea of moderation is different than my idea of moderation, right? So it's it's not a guideline in any way, shape, or form. And so if people go to our website, alcoholpolicy.org, we have in anticipation of that, we released our own set of recommendations based on all kinds of input from lots of scientists and folks that have been working on this issue for the last 5 years. And, it starts with, if you don't drink, don't start. If you are at risk in these different categories, whether it's underage or a history of cancer or in your family or whatever the case may be, don't drink. But if you do drink, drink less than you have in the past. And basically, it should reflect the science, and it should acknowledge that alcohol is a toxic, addictive carcinogen, and that people should be cognizant of that when they're making choices about their alcohol consumption. It's not, we can't imagine it's going to say anything like that. Instead, it's simply going to say it's part of day-to-day life. Drink moderately or drink responsibly, which is not a responsible guideline to the American people.
And it's so confusing. It's very like when in California, we have these, drinking, the DMV guidelines. And it's so confusing because are you a woman or a man? How much do you weigh? What have you eaten? I mean, I like that it's zero amount of alcohol is healthy for the human body. That's amazing. That's the way it should be out there as the message. So I just thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's disappointing because that's even more confusing. Like you said, to say responsible or moderate, because everyone in the mommy wine culture, or, you ask your friend, you look around and go, well, they drink that much and I don't drink that much. So mine must be moderate, but that's just not, that's not a scale. What does that mean? Yeah.
Right. And filling a wine glass to here is very different than filling a wine glass to here, right?
Exactly.
And yet it's one glass. That's moderation. So
is your wine glass this big? That's a whole bottle. Yeah. But there's also, apparently doctors double the amount. So if you go into a doctor's appointment and you say to the doctor, I drink one glass a day. Well, they're already doubling it because they know people drink more. And then, it's just, and then people think it's heart healthy, right? I mean, that's why I continued to drink. I bought the marketing. Oh, it's got antioxidants and it's so heart healthy. Right. It's that Mediterranean diet. I'm going to keep drinking my red wine. But then the problem with, moderation is that alcohol increases tolerance over time. So anybody can become addicted. It's not just you have the addiction gene or it's in your family. Really, anybody is on a spectrum, and you could be just a normal, moderate, what you consider a normal drinker, and something happens and all of a sudden you're drinking more and more, and then you've flipped to you're addicted and you need it. So that's, we're talking to those kind of people too a lot. Yeah.
But it's also not, Ruby, it's not just about addiction, right? Like if alcohol is involved in domestic violence, alcohol doesn't make someone a violent person per se, but the level of violence increases exponentially, right? If someone is an abuser to begin with, they're an abuser. It's not related to their alcohol use. But if they are an abuser that uses alcohol, it is way more violent and destructive. 25% of suicides involve the person has alcohol. In other words, their judgment is impaired. Their whatever emotional issues or mental health issues they're suffering from are exploited by the fact that they're drinking alcohol. And so I think it's important for an organization like mine to say this is not about substance use disorder, alcohol use disorder, addiction, which it is for me, but from a societal standpoint, we need to really address the fact that this is destructive to the public health, the health of the public, and not limit it to someone who is demonstrating addictive, consumption.
Yes. And pulling on the health thread, seeing more and more alcohol in the health field, like people having Pilates and Prosecco and, yoga and let's have wine afterwards. Those things just kill me because they just don't belong in the health world. Alcohol is not healthy. So even getting that word out, because I think for the types of women that I work with, they're gray area drinkers. They drink, they're very health conscious. So that if they really knew the health risks of alcohol, that would help them be able to either drink less, a lot less maybe, or start that process earlier before maybe it gets to the point where they're using it as a coping mechanism. Like a lot of times, to what Ruby said, your tolerance increases. Maybe you drink socially, but then we work with a lot of women who have an accelerator event. They get divorced, spouse dies, retirement. There's so many people out in retirement, like going nuts and drinking like they're freaking teenagers, and then
over 50 are the fastest growing demographic for people developing alcoholism or addiction.
Exactly.
Right. Because they have money and they have time on their hands and are increasingly isolated. right?
Yeah.
And so alcohol's a really easy crutch. I just went through this with my parents in assisted living, and the day I took them to visit the assisted living, they're like, "Oh, it's happy hour, come on in." And here were all these folks, half of whom had onset of dementia, and they were drinking wine at 4:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
My friend just had her parents go to an assisted living, or it wasn't related to any mental health or, dementia,
Right.
just for regular folks. But there was, independent living, sorry. But there was, happy hour every day. There was alcohol with dinner. They had wine tasting events. All the things seemed to involve alcohol. And I was just like blown away. Like, what?
I know. And
what
then
are you
these
guys
people
doing? Yeah.
Yeah, either in the assisted living or they're living on their own. And then you see the older people, you can fall more easily. You break a hip, at that age, like people, just the knowledge about the harms of alcohol for any age, but especially aging America. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense at all. But also the newest news is, about the brain health, that alcohol actually can increase your risk of developing dementia. And so, oh my gosh. And, I'm dealing with my mother-in-law with dementia. You were mentioning your parents, like just seeing that makes me never want to drink again, honestly, because it's like forgetting your life, forgetting your kids. You're not being able to remember them because of dementia. It's just so sad. That is not a good way to go. But I wonder, so one thing, the connection I put together between our conversation around alcohol and smoking is where I think that we got the public health perspective got traction around smoking was around secondhand smoke and the dangers to other people. And it seems like that case is made right here with, with domestic violence, with DUI, people driving under the influence and killing people, with suicide, with any kind of violence. So I'm wondering why we haven't been able to get more traction from that perspective of it's not just a personal choice. Your personal choice affects the public.
Right. Well, and Susan, I think part of it is, with tobacco, once we had tobacco litigation and we had settlements, then government had money to do those really hard-hitting ads. Like I was in California when that was going on, and who would pick up a cigarette after seeing some of those ads?
I was like, no way. Yeah.
And here in Oregon, we actually were successful in getting the Oregon Health Authority to launch a program called Rethink the Drink, which is really brilliantly done. It's not don't drink. It's not, examples of people with holes in their throats like the tobacco one was, but it's really, demonstrating how, like one of them is two women in a bar sitting there, each having a drink. And one says, "I think I might be drinking too much." And the other said, "Well, how much did you drink over the last week?" And she said, "Well, there was the 2 margaritas on Saturday night." And a waiter puts down 2 margaritas, and then, 3 glasses of champagne at brunch, and then a beer when I got home on Monday. And the waiter just keeps putting, so in 1 week, the table is just full of all these different types of alcohol.
Great ad.
Yeah, it's not telling them not to do. Oh, the alcohol industry here was just beside themselves, upset with it. And we're able to get a bunch of ads pulled last summer. To the point you were making, Susan, we don't have the resources like we did with tobacco to be educating the public. And so we have to mandate that the alcohol industry do it themselves. So there needs to be more point of sale information. There needs to be, there's the warnings that don't get pregnant and drink that are, in most states. But I was noticing when I was at Whole Foods the other day at the cash register, the one sign in the entire place was on the wall about 15 feet away from where anybody was buying anything. So no one sees it, right? It's a bulletin board. And so we don't have any meaningful education like that. And that's what we need to start allocating resources to do at the local, state, and federal level, is pointing all of that out. But we also need to talk about it amongst ourselves, right? And the holidays are coming up. And, one thing that's really unexplored is the fact when alcohol is sold, the closer alcohol is sold to where a woman lives, the more in danger they are for some level of violence or crime or whatever the case may be. Now, I'm sure that's probably true for men, but the research that's available is limited, is around women. And it doesn't matter if the women are drinking, right? It's just that if there are people around them drinking, they are more at risk for some level of harm than if not. And so outlet density, right? If you live in a neighborhood that there are four corner stores, which in a lot of cities is true, and they're all selling alcohol. If you're a woman in that neighborhood, you are more at risk than if you live in the suburbs and someone has to drive a mile to get to the convenience store, to the liquor store, whatever the case may be. So we need to begin to be looking at this as a safety issue and educating people about that fact. And, the other thing is, as our parents used to always say, nothing good happens after midnight, right? And yet we sell alcohol in most states until 2:00 in the morning. Increasingly, like in San Francisco, they're trying to allow them to sell until 4:00 in the morning because it will improve the nightlife. And that's true in a number of states, right? But the nightlife should be dancing and music. It shouldn't be drinking. If you've already been drinking up to midnight or to 2:00 in the morning, drinking till 4 doesn't improve any aspect of, and yet what it does do is we know it increases the harm to people who are drinking or the people that live in that neighborhood, in that community. So there are three things that help, really reduce the harms related to alcohol. One is availability and access. So licensing of permits to sell alcohol, and then hours of service, right? You change those, you limit those, you reduce harms related to alcohol. Education is the other one, and marketing, putting limits on advertising, particularly advertising towards younger people, where kids might see that advertising. Currently, we have no federal guidelines on advertising. The alcohol industry does self-regulation. They follow their own guidelines, which the internet has just they don't at all. And then last and most importantly is price. If we, just like with tobacco, think about how expensive a pack of cigarettes is now. And that's a big reason why people, particularly people that smoke too much, they automatically have to reduce their smoking because they can't afford to do that. And so we know the same is absolutely true with alcohol. And yet in most states, the alcohol taxes have not gone up here in Oregon, since Carter was president. It's totally crazy. So price, access, and knowledge are the three ways to go about this. And to your, before I started rambling about this, we have to expand people's knowledge of the broad impacts, the secondhand impacts of alcohol, particularly on our kids and on on the women in these communities.
Yeah, there was one statistic that you didn't mention, which is sexual violence, rapes. I think it's 90% involve alcohol. A huge number involve alcohol. It's just mind blowing to me, and a lot of this is towards women, right? To violence against women. And I'd never heard that before, but how close you are to a convenience store selling alcohol makes a lot of sense. And I want this out there. But you also mentioned children. So do you think that, the education towards high school, college age kids, I would think that would be very important. Is that an area you guys are working on?
Sure. So about 20 years ago, Congress passed the STOP Act, which allocated money to combat underage drinking. And as a consequence of that, we've seen, I think, a 15% decline in the number of kids under 15 that have consumed alcohol. Now, 15 is not huge, but it's substantive. That's an effective government program. And 20% in the number of high school kids engaged in binge drinking. Well, every other demographic group, including every one of the demographic groups represented between the three of us, binge drinking has gone up. Amongst teenagers, it's gone down. Unfortunately, this year, the Trump administration wanted to zero out the STOP Act. It's $20 million nationwide, right? Barely a drop in the bucket, but had some meaningful, specific allocations of money. And the alcohol industry, which helped us pass the STOP Act 20 years ago, they have seen the statistics of there are fewer Americans drinking, particularly younger Americans drinking. And so they want to stop that, because if you can hook somebody in high school on even a low pattern of drinking, a low, moderate, they will drink throughout their life. Whereas if a kid comes out of high school and never drinks, odds are they are not going to drink very much later. And so the alcohol industry is while they haven't come out in favor of teenage drinking, they have not helped in getting the STOP Act funded. And in fact, we're intentional about certain parts of the STOP Act not getting funding. And then look at their marketing. And, all you have to do is, see some of these billboards for White Claw and some of these other alcohols that, and the way they're, packaged, it's fruit drinks and it's all
energy drink. Yeah. With fruit juice.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, youth are key. The secondhand smoke issue, educating kids about their parents smoking, and then the kids saying something to the parents, we know how effective that was, right? And we don't have anything parallel to that right now going on in the United States relative to young people and alcohol.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great that the younger people, it seems like they are driving this alcohol-free beverage choices in their early 20s, and some of the new bars that are alcohol-free. And I think and maybe this are just the people I follow, but the women that I follow on social media, it's about empowerment for women to not drink, because you do put yourself into sometimes more precarious situations when we do drink. And Ruby and I talk about this all the time too. It dulls our creativity. It dulls our sparkle. Like, it feels like we maybe aren't as productive. You sit around drinking on the couch instead of going out there and doing something meaningful. It's a way to keep women down. Is kind of what we feel like,
Years ago, when I was first getting sober, someone said, "So what's the best part of not drinking?" And I was like, Sunday mornings exist now, right? Like, I'm not lying in bed with a headache, I can get up and go do something. But, the one thing, Ruby, I wanted to add about, because I think it's a really important point, particularly for women, the challenge we have is, the vast majority of victims of sexual abuse, victims of gun violence, have alcohol in their system.
Yeah.
So the challenge is addressing that issue without victimizing them again, right? Like, and saying it was their fault or whatever the case may be, but making sure that, or when we're talking about the link between alcohol and breast cancer, nobody who goes through breast cancer should be blamed for it, because
right.
Like,
we're totally about that. Like, it's not your fault. It's alcohol's fault. Your brain is normal. It's working normal. Alcohol it takes over, and you end up doing things.
Well, and you didn't necessarily know.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's
you have to have the conversation that people could. I was mugged once and I was drunk and I wasn't paying attention, right? We are way more vulnerable when we are under the influence of alcohol, and people need to increasingly understand that. And for younger people in particular, that's hard, right? Because younger people are invulnerable. We're invulnerable.
Invincible. Yeah, that's the word.
And so, we just have to, without preaching to folks or telling them what to do or not to do, we need to somehow raise the consciousness without making anyone feel like they're to blame for what happened to them. No matter how drunk you are, you don't deserve any of that, right?
Exactly.
And so, and you didn't cause any of that. You're not responsible for any of that. But how do we also just make sure that people are cognizant of that? So it's, in today's world, it can be a difficult conversation to have. And the more resources that we can generate for public health messaging is really important. And that's at the core of what USAPA is trying to do.
I have one story that just came to mind when you mentioned like the secondhand smoke and how that relates to alcohol. So Annie Grace, who wrote This Naked Mind, and where Susan and I are certified with This Naked Mind, she wrote Buzz to Buzzkill, like a kid's book. And I bought that book for my nieces and nephews that were ages, I think, 11 and 12 at the time. And I gave them to them as Christmas presents. And my brother and sister-in-law were furious with me because they drink every night. And they took the books away, said they will not let their kids read them. And so we have an uphill battle. Like, that was just within my own family. And the book is really cute. It's really well written. It's like just explaining, like, almost like alcohol's like video games, and describing dopamine and how you get addicted, and but now it's still something between my brother and sister-in-law and myself. So it's like becoming an advocate. I have to hear these things from my family. Like, I live in Sonoma County and I have family members that work in the wine industry. And they actually will say to me, Ruby, you're going to affect, cousin's job, who works in the wine. It's like, no, I'm trying to, have better health for people. So it is an uphill battle is what I was trying to explain. Yeah.
Yeah, there's such a warm, fuzzy feeling around our alcohol companies, particularly like you mentioned, the craft level, the wineries, the craft breweries, the farmers. Like, people get married at wineries. And so whereas people never, yes, they did have that for like plantations, right? But the fact is, tobacco plantations both were where people were forced labor for 400 years and were building, producing a product that kills people. And it'll never be that way for alcohol. I don't think alcohol has been present throughout human history. For some people, it plays an important role in social interactions, but it doesn't need to. And we need to rethink the drink, as they say here
I love
in Oregon.
that.
I love that. I wish we could have that nationwide. Take what you did in Oregon and bring it nationwide. That would be fantastic.
That would be wonderful.
Well, I have one last question for listeners who really care about this and want to help amplify your message. And what are the most meaningful ways they can support the U.S. Alcohol Policy Alliance? Following your work or engaging with, you were mentioning before we started recording that you have a podcast now, or getting involved in advocacy work,
Yeah. I mean, so go to our website and sign up for our emails, alcoholpolicy.org, alcoholpolicy.org. There are links there to our podcast, and our podcast is trying to sort of bring the science down to a consumer level. And all of our October episodes, which is when we launched, were linked to the link between alcohol and breast cancer, because it was National Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So, but moving forward, we'll sort of be addressing a wide variety of policy level issues through the sort of every man or every person lens. Once you sign up, getting it, if you get an email saying, hey, please reach out to your member of Congress, click here, or, call your senator, please do that. The alcohol industry has 300 paid lobbyists. We have one very part-time lobbyist.
Wow.
And so, but we have the moral authority of the fact that this is a toxic, addictive carcinogen that a lot of people make a lot of money off of, but that kills more people than fentanyl, car crashes, and gun violence combined. And then lastly, support our work. We don't take funding from the alcohol industry. We don't take government funding because we're advocating for change in government policy. And so we need to keep the lights on. And the resources that we're raising right now are going towards creating a national alcohol strategy so that both policymakers and activists at local, state, and federal level will have a blueprint we're all working off of. And we can't necessarily coordinate with each other. But if we're saying, okay, this is what needs to happen in order to reduce the harms related to alcohol, if we got the same playbook, then we're going to be connected. And so that's exciting. And then talk to family and friends, challenge the assumption that this upcoming event, somebody's got to be responsible for bringing the wine or the beer or the shots of tequila or whatever the case may be. Like, don't say no, but have the conversation. Like, is this really, do we need champagne at a baby shower? The mom can't drink. Do we need beer at the kids' playoff games? What message is that sending? And there's that one obnoxious dad who gets drunk and then ruins it for everybody, right?
Right.
So just, help people start to put boundaries on where we're allowing alcohol to literally seep in and flood us as we have, and start pushing that back. I think that's really important.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, no more alcohol at DARE functions. Hello, what are we doing?
Yeah.
That's insane. It would be great to have volunteers in each state too, to volunteer to coordinate for their state. Yeah. Maybe, that's a way people could get involved in.
We work with state organizations in about 20 different states. And so we can connect people with those folks as well. And they can get action alerts when there's state legislation or even local legislation tied to their zip code. Right. So,
so cool.
Yeah. But it takes a village, and the science is on our side. The demographics are on our side to some extent because young people are tuning in quicker than older people around alcohol. We're not looking to prohibit alcohol. We're not looking to ruin people's livelihoods. What we're looking to do is improve and elevate the health of every American family.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. Yeah. Harm reduction is really an important factor here. And I think you're right, about shame and blame. And even at the grassroots level, we talk about this on the podcast, I've been alcohol free 5 years, Ruby 6 years. Even in my own family, I've seen alcohol consumption lessen just because I'm bringing some alcohol free bubbly and other people are drinking it, and people are getting on board with, let's all have a toast with the alcohol free drinks first. And then if you choose to have wine with dinner, etc. So it is grassroots. It is going to be person to person. That's how we're going to create this change, I think. But I would love to get involved, and I'm sure there's some of our listeners who would be excited to get more information and see what they can do to support this wonderful cause. And this is the time in our podcast when we ask all of our guests what they do in their life to feel lit alcohol free.
Oh God, it's so just, there's so many things, right? Like I love being in nature and hiking with my husband and walking the dogs. I love being a dog owner that's really responsible to take care of these crazy dogs we have. But I will say this, and I've just gone through with my dad passed away at the age of 96 in March, and my stepmom is going through her journey with dementia. And I am showing up and have been able to show up for them and my siblings and with my siblings. And that it's a very emotional time. It's a challenging time, all kinds of stuff coming up. And yet, because I am sober, because I'm in recovery, I have been able to show up in a way that is just really wonderful for me. Like, and when my dad passed, like so many men, like so many gay men, I had issues with my dad and he had issues with me over the years, but nothing went unsaid. I was with him when he passed. And so I guess the lit thing is I get to be a really good person, a good brother, a good son, a good citizen. And that makes me happy. That is what's really important to me, is that I can show up in a way that's really important and helpful, supportive.
Hear, hear. I second that. Yeah. Thank you. Same here.
I love that.
Beautiful.
That was beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being our guest. Such great information. And we are going to put everything in the show notes so that our listeners can get involved at whatever level they would like. But I mean, this is just really, really important. I'm so glad that Laura introduced us. I'm glad that I found you on LinkedIn and we had this opportunity to have you on our podcast. Thank you so much.
This has been great. Thank you so much. The last thing I'll say is, we put on the biannual alcohol policy conference in DC every other year, and it's going to be in September of 26 next year. And so we'll let you know about that. It would be great for you guys to be there, and you could do all kinds of podcasting, broadcasting. And if we're going to build a movement, we need to be able to convene. So again, and thank you for what you guys do. And thanks for having me.
Thank you. That sounds fabulous. We will pencil that in for September 26th.
Want to do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you all to our listeners. Thank you for being here. And we will see you next week. Thanks so much for listening to the Sober and Lit podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode, we would love it if you would subscribe, rate, and review. It really helps get the word out.
And remember, do something today to help you feel lit.
See you next week.